From the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Good morning. I'm Emilye Crosby. It's December 10th, 2015. We're at the Library of Congress with Juadine Henderson, and this is part of the Civil Rights History Project, co-sponsored by the Library of Congress and the Civil Rights History Project. The Library of Congress and the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. And with us is John Bishop. Can you tell, first of all, just thank you for joining us and doing the interview. And can you tell us when and where you were born and about your family?
Yes, I was born in Batesville, Mississippi, Panola County. My parents were Leora Morris and Hugo Henderson. We were farmers. We had a small farm where we grew cotton, corn, okra, soybean major. And that was about it. My dad died when I was about 4 or 5. We're not sure of all the circumstances. So I grew up basically with my mother, who was married again when I was 10, and that's when we moved to the farm.
That's when you began farming? So
Yeah.
Before that, did you live in town?
We lived in town, but we could hire ourselves out to local farmers, so I bought my first coat when I was 5
Really?
from picking cotton.
Really?
Yeah.
You appreciate that coat since you
Oh,
bought it
yes,
yourself?
of course. Oh, I had to count my money every day. 25 cents now. Yeah.
How did you feel about picking cotton?
It was natural, normal. It was fine.
Yeah.
We also picked pecans.
Yeah.
So it was good.
When your mother remarried and you moved to the farm, did your family own that land? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was 80 acres, and one group of brothers owned one side of the road. Their first cousins, another group of brothers, owned the other side, and it was called Section 7. And everybody referred to it as 7.
Huh.
You're going to 7. Mm-hmm.
At the time, were you aware of the difference it made to own your own land? Did that
No.
mean anything to you?
No, it did not. Before we moved to the farm, my mom worked in a restaurant in town. It was called Brown's Cafe. And I would go in on Saturdays to be with her. So she allowed me to wash dishes when I went in, and I had on an apron, and it was all the way to the floor. And I was curious about why we had to stay in the kitchen. What happens outside here? And she said, well, the next tray of glasses that you wash, do not stop walking until you get out front with them. That was my first little experience. I think I was about 8 years old.
Yeah.
So I walked my glasses out front and looked around and went, they're just eating.
Did you think it was something really exciting?
No, like, oh, that's different.
Yeah. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have 2 older sisters and 1 younger sister, and a brother who is no longer here. He died about 5 years ago.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
What were your schools like?
Well, I started school at age 3 because my grandmother was the teacher, and she was also my babysitter, so I had to go to school with her every day. And it was a church-owned, I guess, it was a public school, but it was run by the church somehow. And it was 1 through 8 grades in that one little building.
Was
I think,
she the only teacher?
yeah, it was just for community kids. It was Olive Ray School, next to Olive Ray Church. And I went into any class I wanted to, because when it was your time to go for your class, they would go to the front seat, and I would join them. And I had to do homework at night, so it was kind of fun. I learned to read and write fairly early, like 3 or 4.
Was it hard when you were actually with your own class?
Yes, it was, because I was bored. My mother wouldn't allow me to move ahead. She wanted me with my age group. So they were learning alphabets, and I wanted to play.
'Cause you
So
already
yeah,
had that down.
yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
So that was hard. I got in trouble a lot. I was ordered to the corner a lot. Stand in the corner, Maria.
By your grandmother?
No, this was the real public school
Yeah.
with other people.
So when did you start going to a different public school?
Oh, when I was 6,
Okay, so you went with your grandmother to her school, but you went to a different school?
a public
with your
school when I turned
hometown?
6, yes.
What
With
was that school like?
different kids from all over, people to play with. It was good.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned being at the restaurant and being curious. What are some of your memories of race and how you learned about it?
Well, when I started school at age 6, we went to school on a farm worker's truck. A truck came by in the mornings, and the man got out and put a ladder down, and we climbed up. The white kids went past us on the school bus, and we yelled at each other and waved. But also in my little neighborhood, the family across the road from us was white, apparently poor because they wouldn't have been there otherwise. And we played with the kids, but one person had to look out for their father. When we saw their father's car coming, they had to go around through the back and go home. And he couldn't know that they were overplaying with us.
Did you think about that at the time?
We just knew that somebody had to watch out for their father's car. No, didn't really mean anything to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did it start to mean something?
When I was working with my mother in that restaurant at age 8, and seeing all the black people who came to the restaurant ate in the kitchen with her. And then there were these other people, and we could not see what they were doing out front, and that was different.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I was also 8, I think it was when the Emmett Till murder happened. And my mom bought me a copy, I think it was Look or Life magazine, I'm not sure, and Jet magazine. And of course I knew then there was something seriously wrong out there. I read the stories. I cried for his parents more than him, thinking, what would Mother do if somebody did that to me, you know? Yeah. So I was about 8 when I really knew something was seriously wrong in the neighborhood.
When your mother gave those to you, did she talk to you about it?
No, not really.
Yeah.
No, I just read it
Yeah.
because I tried to read everything I could find. And she gave me that. I read it and was sad for his mom more than anything. And we didn't discuss it.
Yeah. And you didn't talk about it with other kids?
No,
Yeah.
no. There were a lot of things that we never talked about, you know, and that was one of them. We never talked about, and there was a meeting, I think probably NAACP meeting in our house. We had 2 rooms. It was a little storehouse. It had been a store. And the kitchen and the living room was where we slept, you know. And there was a meeting there, and I was not allowed. You know, I could stay in the back and do whatever I was doing. And I found my mother's NAACP card and said, what is this? What is NAACP? I didn't say NAA, I said NAACP. And she said, you must never, ever say that again, ever. And I was like, okay. Whatever it is, it must be very serious. And we never discussed what they were talking about in the next room. But at church on Sundays, the minister talked about everything. We talked about the kids in Little Rock who had just integrated the schools there, voter registration things that had not really started. I think there were 2 people in the county, 2 black people registered to vote. And we just sort of heard that on Sundays. There was an older minister, Reverend Middleton, Godfrey, that's his name. And I hated to see him coming on Sundays because it meant we had to stay at church another half an hour to listen to Black history. He traveled around in a little beat up Jeep and he talked history. And you could almost work him out. He said the same thing every time. We knew who Crispus Attucks was.
Sort of like the Black History Month posters?
Yeah, but he did it every Sunday. Oh, no, every other Sunday, because we didn't have church every Sunday. We had Sunday school and other stuff, but
So what was your church?
West Camp Missionary Baptist Church, initially, until my mom got married.
And was it West Camp Missionary where you had these Sunday school, talks about Black history?
Yeah, and it was one of the,
voting?
yeah, it was one of the most active churches in the county throughout the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm.
When they would talk about voting or NAACP or any of these things in church and Black history, was this part of the service or before or after?
It was after the service. After you finished, you can't say that. I did. Anyway, after they would finish with the traditional service, and the guests would all, stand up and introduce themselves, and then they talked about what was going on in other southern places like Clarksdale, Mississippi, Arkansas, and we didn't talk that much about what was going on in our own town.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of what's in the news?
Yeah.
What's happening with the...
Oh, what was going on, what the NAACP mainly was involved with. There were a couple of brothers, C.J. Williams and his brother were active, and Mr. Robert Miles, of course, who stayed active, and Mr. Willie Kirkendall. It came sort of to a head because Mr. Kirkendall's daughter, who was younger than I am, went to town and was accused of stealing. The sheriff brought her to her dad and said, "You have to beat her." And the child said she didn't steal. And her dad said, "I'm not beating my child." And you didn't say no to the sheriff. And the energy in the neighborhood changed. I don't know how to explain that other than you knew it was really serious. And near nightfall, you saw all of the men, or most of the men, walking down the road with their guns on their shoulders to the Kirkendall house. They sent the women and children away, and they climbed into the trees and the trucks to protect the house, the family, so to speak. And the Kirkendall family moved away. I never actually saw them again. They went to Indiana, found out later. Mm-hmm. So you knew something was seriously wrong then. But it wasn't, the nonviolent movement stuff had not happened. Like, we will protect ourselves. Uh-huh.
Do you remember how old you were when this happened?
I had to be 8 or 9.
Yeah.
It seems to me everything happened when I was 8. I don't know, 8 or 9, because we still lived in our little 2-room house in town.
And so this would have been, probably around 55, 56?
Oh, way after that.
Okay.
Uh-huh, way after that. Probably later 50s,
Okay.
maybe early 60s.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Kirkendall was superintendent of the Sunday school, so everybody knew him. Mm-hmm.
Did your family talk about that when it happened?
Oh, no. It was just my mom and me. So,
yeah.
no, we didn't discuss it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember what age you were, or how you came to understand what the NAACP was, other than this card that you can't talk about?
I think I was probably 13. It was after we had moved to the farm, and Frank Smith, the SNCC person, came to town in 1962 for Thanksgiving. He didn't come to do movement work.
Uh-oh.
And my cousin, he had met my cousin at Rust College in Holly Springs, and I ran up to their house across the road to hear about college and what you do at college, and there was this stranger there. So I said hello, and he told me about the civil rights movement. Now, we knew about the freedom rides because it was in the newspaper. We got the commercial appeal from Memphis. And he actually knew people who were involved. He was involved. I found it fascinating. And I talked, and we talked, and I told him that the uncle to one of the men who killed Emmett Till lived in the neighborhood, and got in the car with him and showed him the house, and we came back home, and then I was so excited. I went home, and Mother said, "You got into a stranger's car." He's not a stranger, he's T's friend. And I told her what he told me about Black people voting and should have the right to vote, and that there are no Black people in Batesville who voted, and if they did, we could change the whole system. And Mother was looking at me like, yeah, right. Okay.
What are you talking about, girl?
Uh-huh. Go play. Go do something else. Uh-huh. So that was really the beginning.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. We stayed in touch with Frank. I told all of my friends about him and the movement. I think we had a meeting at my house, but I didn't tell my mom because she would have said no. So people started coming, and it was like, Juadine, what are you doing? We're having a meeting. And I was the pianist at church. I played piano every Sunday at our new church. That was Concord Missionary Baptist Church. And I knew that the church wasn't locked. Frank was trying to teach us freedom songs he could not sing. We had no clue what they were supposed to sound like. So after the initial meeting at our house, we went to church and had a meeting. We didn't ask anybody, we just went. We took a record player, and Frank brought with him a copy of the Albany Movement album. So we got to hear what freedom songs sounded like.
Is that Freedom in the Air? Is that the?
It was called the Albany Movement, I think.
Okay.
But Bernice Johnson Reagan was definitely a singer on there. So we could do that now.
What was it like to hear that
It was
record?
wonderful. It was like mainly you put freedom in places where Jesus had been. That was very good. So we knew how to do that because my girlfriends and me, we are now like 13, 14, and we could sing freedom songs, and we did.
You didn't worry about messing with the church songs?
No, I didn't. They did. I didn't. The elders.
What would they say?
Well, it didn't come to a head right then. It later, when
Okay.
the preacher finished preaching and I was supposed to play Amazing Grace, I played Oh Freedom.
And you survived?
Some people got very upset and said the child has lost her mind. And yeah, I had. Yeah.
So you said that you were telling us about how you played Oh Freedom instead of Amazing Grace.
Yes.
And then you started to say that you're something about your mother.
Yeah. Before that, the summer of '63, we met Frank at Thanksgiving 1962.
Okay.
And Frank, I thought he was an adult. He was 19 years old, I think. And he told us about a voter registration workshop that was going to be held in Greenwood, Mississippi, and he wanted us to come. Mother didn't let me have dates, so it was like, okay, how am I going to get to this workshop? I packed my bag and eased it under the bed, the storage place, because I was going. I was hearing words that I'd never heard before, but that happened in Greenwood. Mother, after my dad's death, she didn't do anything. She didn't make decisions for me alone. She had a brother who she consulted. And I wanted to go to Greenwood, so he was a dry cleaner truck driver. He came to our house, as he did on Mondays, and she said, Juadine wants to go with those freedom people to Greenwood. And he said, Jimmy's going. Jimmy was my older cousin. She was 3 years older. It was freedom, like, oh yeah, we're going. And he said, if anything happens and you need to come home, call somebody. We didn't have telephones. There was one telephone in the neighborhood, and everybody had the number. So if something happened and your family needed to contact you, they called that number and they would let you know. So we headed to Greenwood, Mississippi, June 1963. There was my cousin Jimmy, my friend Faye, John Hardy, and I think that was it, 3 of us. And my cousin John Morris, who was a college student. Jimmy was also a college student. And we went to Greenwood, very excited about being able to get away from home without your mother and all of that, with these freedom people. And we got to the Greenwood SNCC office and looked around, and people were talking on the phone, very hushed and very serious, and we sort of took it in and sat there and watched. Then we were taken across the street to stay with a woman named Mama Hackman. That was all we knew. And everybody was very friendly. There were kids our age talking to us and pulling our legs a little bit too, because we were going to go to a mass meeting that evening. And I didn't know mass, M-A-S-S, from mask, M-A-S-K. It was like, what are we supposed to do at this meeting? And one of the girls said, you have to hold the hand with the person you're with and walk in. Do we wear anything? Nope, you just go in. And we went to the meeting, and we heard Freedom sing songs, how they were really supposed to sound in person at that meeting that night. It was very nice. And younger people, just a little bit older than we were, singing and leading songs, and it was very nice. We went back to Mama Hackman's house. I don't know where we ate. And then the next morning we went in to the SNCC office, and it was a very different energy. People weren't as friendly as they had been the day before. It was very strange. It was like, what is going on? We sat there and was quiet for a second or two. And then a kid who called himself Freedom, I don't know what Freedom's name was, came in and we said, what's going on, Freedom? Why is everybody so sad? And he said Medgar Evers was killed last night in Jackson. And it was like, uh-oh, we gotta go home. Jimmy said, you think we need to call Daddy? I said, no, we're here, we're staying. And so we stayed, and they told us they were gonna canvass the neighborhood. Had we heard of canvassing? Nope. Okay, what is that? We're gonna walk around from house to house, passing out leaflets, inviting people to a meeting, a mass meeting. Okay. So we went with the local kids, walked around the neighborhoods, passing out leaflets saying there was a meeting at 11 o'clock at some church or the other. We went, there were more people at that church than I had ever seen gathered in one place in Batesville, It was amazing. And people that we had met the day before in the SNCC office were up leading songs and talking. I don't remember what they said, it was just the energy. And my cousin and me tried to sing as loud as we could. We wanted to, like we know how to sing freedom songs now. But it was talking about what was going on in Jackson. I don't remember specifics, but being very energized by the whole thing. We went back to the SNCC office and had workshops, a workshop, whatever that is, on filling out voter registration forms. And at that gathering, I think I met John O'Neill, who was with the Free Southern Theater later, Willie Peacock, who was major freedom fighter in Mississippi from Charleston, James Peacock, his brother. And they were talking about voter registration, how to fill out the forms, how necessary it was for Black people to be able to register to vote in their neighborhoods, and how they get to elect people to office. That was amazing to me. And then we would sing every day.
Did you connect voting to things in your life or your community?
No, because I told you there were 2 people, as far as I knew, in the county who were registered voters. I think Mr. Miles, Robert Miles, and maybe Reverend Middleton. I'm not sure of that.
But when they're telling you about it and you're thinking about it in a different
Yeah, of
way,
course.
do you have to, in that context, do you think about how it might affect things in your world, or is it just...
A little bit, well, what they were saying, what you started thinking about, you haven't paid a lot of attention to elections. We need to be a part of that. It was something you read about in school, not something you did, not voting. So yeah, we connected. We connected the dots a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then interpreting a section of the Constitution, the state constitution, okay.
That's a little bit like schoolwork.
It was schoolwork. And filling out the forms. They were very long. We practiced filling them out so we could show people how to do it when we went back home. We were only in Greenwood for a week. I think while we were gone, and I'm not sure of this, June Johnson, who was from Greenwood, Miss Hamer, who was from Ruleville, Uvesta Simpson, who was from Itabena, I think, came up missing. And they sent Lawrence Gilliard off to look for them. Now we're eavesdropping, okay? We weren't a part of the major discussions, we're kids. But it was all interesting information. And we had to go home after a week. And a couple of SNCC people took us back to Batesville, and we were trying to tell them about our town and what happens there. Batesville at the time, I think, was 54% black. No black voters. And we weren't all, the 3,000 people who lived in the neighborhood didn't all live next to each other. We were scattered. We were farmers. And a few people had other kinds of jobs, but very few.
Did a lot of African Americans own their land in that area?
Yeah, actually, yes.
So there wasn't nearly as much sharecropping?
No, there was one plantation that we knew about, that I knew about in our part of the county, because there was northern Panola County and South Panola County. South Panola County people owned their land pretty much. There was a plantation, the Mcmillan Plantation, where sharecroppers lived, and their little houses sat next to each other. We knew their kids because we all went to school together. And we didn't think about them any differently except they lived on the plantation, on the Mcmillan Plantation. Yeah.
It was one big plantation?
It wasn't that big, you know?
Yeah.
Now, in retrospect, it wasn't that big. It's just they didn't own their own land. Yeah.
I wanted to, is Panola part of the Delta?
Part of it. Half of Panola County is in the Delta, and the other half is hill country.
So which half is where African Americans own land, or was it split?
Split.
Okay.
Hmm. We lived in the Delta.
You did.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned that while you were in Greenwood, Miss Hamer and June Johnson, who was a native of Greenwood, I guess.
Yeah.
Esther Simpson, that they come up missing, and Lawrence Giat goes
To look for them. Hmm.
How do you find out what happened to them?
Later.
You did?
We didn't find out while we were there.
How did you come to find out?
Somebody told us. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hmm. I stayed in touch with SNCC people after that 1 week experience. Another group of kids from my town went to Greenwood to do the voter registration workshop. And I looked at the newspaper differently, looked for stories about people I had met, you know. We didn't find out about Miss Hamer and June Johnson. I knew June's sister, Dorothy. She was, I think, my age. We found out later, but not from the newspaper. And I don't really remember how. Oh, I know, from the group of kids who went after we did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
They came back and
yeah.
had the
They
news?
told, yeah.
How did you feel when you found that out?
It didn't really do anything, didn't register. It wasn't fear. It was, you know, I think Lawrence Giat, we knew, was beaten after that or during that time. I didn't really know Mrs. Hamer. I didn't know June. I had met her mother and her sister when I was in Greenwood. Uvesta, I didn't know either.
Yeah.
So these were strangers to me.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a real connection until later.
Until later, and then
Yeah.
you know them, and then it
Yeah,
means something
yeah.
different.
Yeah, of course.
What did you do when you got back from the workshop? Did you start doing movement work?
Trying. We would run around and, well, I harassed my mother and my stepfather about registering to vote and how important it was that black people elected officials in our town. And they sort of listened, but, you know, okay. Mother said, I think those people hypnotized you while you were in Greenwood. You didn't come back the same person that you were when you went. It's like, no. So it was trying to show people how to fill out the forms, trying to get my mother and stepfather to register to vote, at least to try. And people had meetings in the neighborhood to talk about it, not mass meetings, but a few people got together to talk about it. And that went on. This was '63. The very next summer was the summer of '64, the summer project, and all of these people came to town. Now, I will admit on tape that I was a little resentful that all of these people came out to stare at these new people, and we've been begging you to do this for a year. So, okay, that was that, and the whole movement in Batesville changed, I think. You had a lot more people coming together. We got to meet kids from other parts of the county who were active. It was on, you know.
Before the summer project, when you're working in 63 and you're trying to get people to register, are there any SNCC people staying in town full time?
No,
or is this
no,
just
no. Frank came back sometime. Willie Blue, who was also a SNCC organizer, came to town for a while. Tillman McKellar came to town for a while. There was no office. They came and lived with a family someplace, you know, mainly Mr. Miles. Yeah, but there wasn't a SNCC office until the summer of 64.
So were they organizing you all, or were you organizing yourselves?
We were both.
Yeah.
They were organizing us and talking to us, and we were organizing ourselves. You know, we live here. We know what's going on. And that's basically what my mom said in 64. You can continue to do what you've been doing, but don't hang out with these white children. They are going to leave, and you're going to be here. I said, oh, okay.
Did that make sense to you?
No.
Did you listen to her?
No, I got in trouble because there was an office in town. I think it was COFO office by then, Council of Federated Organizations. And we lived 10 miles away in the country. And we had gone out to do whatever we were doing. And by the time we got back to the office, it was late and there was no ride home. So we had to get a ride home with a young white man from Harvard, Jeff Cowan. And I thought, you know, Mother's not going to see. She saw everything. Jeff dropped us off. He had some beat-up car. He dropped me off, and Mother had a fly swatter. I'm 16, I think, or 17, I don't know. But she hit me with the fly swatter, said, I told you not to ride around here with these white children. It's like, how was I supposed to get home? 10 miles away, Mother. And she let it go. She let it go.
Was she worried about you?
Worried is the word. That was mainly it. She was worried that something would happen, you know. Nothing did. Not yet.
Did you ever have any luck getting your mother and your stepfather to register?
Oh, yes. They registered in 1964. My stepfather had to interpret Section 30 of the Mississippi Constitution. He memorized the thing while he's filling out his voter registration form, and he talked it all night long. And they said, interpret Section 30 of the Mississippi Constitution. It said, it was like, of course he had had a little drink too, that helped. But he said the whole section all night long. They were very proud of themselves. They both passed.
So they both passed on their first time out?
Yeah, they
Did they
did.
give you credit?
No. If they did, they didn't tell me.
Yeah. Tell me about some of the older people in Panola who were involved in the movement.
That was Mr. Miles. I told you he was from West Camp. Mr. C.J. Williams, who had gone to an all-black boarding school, Piney Woods. You heard of Piney Woods?
Yeah, I've heard of Piney Woods.
He had gone to school there. And his brother, Jasper, that was his name, Jasper Williams. And there was a Robinson family. They were also West Camp people. Pearl Robinson and her daughter Claire. Miss Virgil Robinson, who was also from West Camp. Everybody was from West Camp.
Is that the area where people own their own land?
People owned their own land
Just everywhere.
all over the place,
So
yeah.
do you know what it was about West Camp that made
The minister probably helped a lot. But you had the Tucker brothers. And the Panolian, the local newspaper, did a feature on them a couple of years ago.
Really?
And they were very active, but they had traced their ancestry back to Guinea. He said he was from the Guinea tribe in Africa, and I thought, that's not a tribe, but that's okay. They were very active, so they had a whole sense of self-worth, I think, the folks in Panola County, the landowners. People tried to send it, because there were no high schools for black kids until the 50s, I think, because my older stepsister went to Rust College High School. My grandmother went away to school. My mother stayed in 8th grade for 3 years because she couldn't go to high school, you know. So she just kept going to school and going to school in 8th grade, you know. She,
I know people who did that.
no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, because they would have them repeat 7th or 8th grade a couple of times since they
'Cause-
were in high school.
yeah.
They would,
And-
and also because sometimes they wouldn't get to go the whole year.
Yeah.
They had the
Well,
short sessions.
we had split sessions
Yeah.
until I graduated from high school so we could get out and work on the farm. We got out to chop cotton, and then we got out to pick cotton. All the white kids were going to school, and we were out working, you know?
Did you think about that at the time?
No,
Yeah,
no, it was just normal.
just how things are.
Yeah. And we were on our own farm, so it was different.
So did the young people in Panola County, did you all want to get involved in direct action? I know in some counties, the young people got tired of voter registration.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We got involved. We went in '64, I think it was, we went to the same restaurant where my mom had worked. Mother quit her job at the restaurant saying, if they come out, anybody put their hands on you, I'm coming out of the kitchen with a knife. So I'm going to quit. And she quit and got a job in the neighborhood at the local restaurant.
So
The
she
black
knew you were
restaurant.
getting ready to go.
She didn't know what to expect. She had to listen to the radio for a while to find out whether I was at school or in jail. But we went to the restaurant where she had worked, and I knew the waitress and the owners because my mom had worked there, you know. And we walked in, we had practiced falling out of the chairs and, you know, nonviolent workshops and covering ourselves. And we were told not to talk. Didn't mean that we couldn't talk through our teeth like this. So we went to the restaurant in town. I don't remember how many of us, maybe 14, quite a few.
Was it even boys and girls?
Mostly girls, I think. There were a couple of boys. John Hardy, Junior Robinson, who was the youngest, I think he was 13 or 14. His mom was Mrs. Virgil Robinson. Excuse me. We went into the restaurant, and Miss Lil, the waitress who had been there when my mother worked there, walked over by us and said, "We're not drinking any cake and eating any milk in here today." She was nervous. And I was like, okay. We sat there like we were supposed to do, waiting patiently. And then we saw the sheriff come in. So, girl, we're going to get it now. To my girlfriend, Faye Glover. And after the sheriff came in, some farmers came in, putting on their brown cotton gloves. Uh-oh.
These are white farmers?
Oh, yeah. They're walking in and they're going behind the counter where the waitress normally is. And we're sitting there on in our little booths thinking, I wonder what they're going to do now. And they came in and they started grabbing the seats we were on and slinging them across the floor, and we were holding on, you know, like we're not falling yet. And then they started picking us up bodily and throwing us out into the street in front of cars or whatever, you know. And they took a couple of people and banged their heads together. And they got us all out. Nobody was arrested yet.
How did you feel how did you cope with this violence?
It was a little scary because I didn't know what to expect, you know. A little scary. Not being super scared, but a little scared. And so we said, there's another restaurant in town, and it's lunchtime, let's go down there. And so off we went to the next restaurant. Batesville is a tiny little town. There weren't big restaurants. And so we went, and they locked the door. They saw us coming. And the guys in the pool hall across the way came out with their pool cues. And it was like, oh, they're going to beat us now. They didn't. We stood there and said, if you go through the front door, we're going in. And if you go to the back, we're not coming. So you want to go in, you got to go through the back door.
So you turned the tables, so
Yeah.
we have to eat out of the back.
We're not moving. We stood there until lunch hour was over, and then we decided to go back to our neighborhood. And we were walking down the road when the sheriff, I think there were maybe 3 people in the sheriff's department, deputy, said, "You're under arrest. You've broke a city ordinance." And we started laughing. Of course, we were bad kids. And we started singing. He marched us through town to the jail.
What were you singing?
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round.
You
We
called their
gotta
names?
keep on talking, walking. No, we didn't call their names because we didn't know their names at that point. We knew Sheriff Hubbard. We didn't know the other people. We went to jail, and they booked us and didn't lock the door. He said, I'm not gonna lock you up in here, but you have to stay in the cell. There were other prisoners in there, so it was a good opportunity to say, you don't need to do crime. We have other work to do out here. So, of course, we were all over the place. And he made us go back to the cell. It was kind of, okay, go back in there until you leave, and then we're going back out and talk to prisoners. And at 5 o'clock, those of us who were under 18 were told to go home. Anybody 18 and over had to stay. So I went home, walked home.
Were you worried when you got put in jail?
No, I expected it.
Because it's the movement, it's just...
Yeah, that's what happens. You know, kids all over the state were going to jail. And so I went home. I went back up. I was headed back up to the jail the next day to take some ice water for the kids, a big jar. And the sheriff pulled up and said, get in. I know you're going to do something. And took me back to jail. Didn't lock up the cell. I'm roaming, you know, having a good time, actually. And that happened a few times. And then when the kids who were over 18 had to go to trial, the whole community turned out in Batesville, lots of people. And some local people thought they could walk through the crowd and hit the white kids who were there. I think Chris Williams was in the group.
So when you say the white kids, you mean the white volunteers?
Yeah,
Part of the movement?
yeah, I do. And Mr. Miles, our local hero, decked him. The guy who was going to go through the crowd to get Chris got hit by Mr. Miles. The older people didn't buy the nonviolence, okay? No, you hit me, we're hitting you back. Anyway, so Mr. Miles was arrested and people had to put up land for him. We had a mass meeting that night, I think at Mount Zion Church, which is closer to town. And I don't remember what happened with the older kids and when they went to court, but the younger ones, we had to go to juvenile court. And the lawyers were all busy all over the state with other kids who were in jail for everything. And they told us to ask for a continuance. What is a continuance? Okay, we'll ask. And we did that, and the judge said that if we kept doing stuff like we were doing, we were going to have a record. And when freedom comes, you're going to have a criminal record. And I'm sitting there grinning, as I always do. He said, wipe that smile off your face. So I wiped it off and threw it on the floor, and my mother looked at me like, you better behave yourself.
She's still worried.
Oh yeah, she's worried. They were both. My stepfather also was worried. That was over. We didn't have to go back to jail for anything. But one Saturday morning, a knock came because we moved from the farm into town, got a little house, a little bigger house.
Were they still farming, or did they do different
Yeah,
work?
the farm was
So they
still
would
there.
Go back and forth.
Mother was still working at the Sundry,
Uh-huh.
Thomas Sundry in town. My stepfather was going back to the farm to do farming. I was a senior in high school by now. But a knock came on our door one Saturday morning, and my stepfather opened the door. The deputy stepped in just as I was walking out of my room. And he said, oh, wrong house, and stepped back down and left. And my stepfather said, you're moving out of that room today. And the shotguns came out. Like he loaded the gun and put it in the corner like, oh no, they're not getting you. Not in here. So
he assumed that the deputy was there to figure out how to get you?
yeah,
That
yeah.
that they would be coming for you?
yeah.
Did you think he would, were you worried?
No. I was too young and too silly to worry.
Did you think they might come, but you felt like you
I
were
didn't think about it.
invincible? Yeah.
I didn't think about it. I really didn't. My high school principal, who was also family, after I'd gone to the jail one day for something to visit my old friends who were 18, and somebody fired a gun. And I ran back inside and said, "Sheriff Hubbard, somebody just shot." And he said, "You had no business up here." I said, "Okay." Guy just rode down the road in a red pickup truck, and there's a guy on the back with a gun. "You had no business up here." Okay. I went home. And the principal of my high school said, "If we can do anything to help, let me know."
Really?
Yeah. I said, "I'm good." I was, you know.
So you feel you really had support in your community?
Yeah, there was support in the community. And one of the earlier stories before the 64 Summer Project, I told you, the older people were not nonviolent people. We were having a voter registration meeting again at West Camp, and they always left 2 people outside to guard. And one of the men came in and said, 2 men just came down here inquiring about what we're doing. So I think we need to go home and get some protection. Almost every woman in the church patted her purse. Got mine right here. And the response was, "Carry on. There's no need to leave." And it was just the way it was. The women walked with pistols in their purses, even to church.
Did they do that before the movement?
Yeah,
Just all the time?
yeah, it's in there.
And the men didn't know it?
They didn't tell them. They didn't tell them. How would they know? We got to protect our families. We don't know what's going to happen, you know?
Did your mom do that?
Yeah, my mom was a good shot.
Yeah.
They didn't teach me because they didn't think I had. They were afraid to teach me. My grandfather, my grandfather, after I turned 18 and I had gone to the Delta to work with the farm workers down there, said, "It's about time that you learn how to shoot." And he took me out and put some bottles on the fence, and I was supposed to shoot them down. Of course, I didn't look. I didn't learn.
You never learned?
No.
You weren't worried?
No.
You didn't feel like you had to have your own pistol in your purse?
I did. I put a pistol in my purse in 1965,
Yeah.
but I didn't know how to shoot it. It was just in there.
You were just hoping that by
That nobody would bother me. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Do you remember, were there any differences between the work that men did and women did in the movement, or the way they participated?
I don't think so. Not locally, anyway. Once you got to a different... after high school, let's go back to that a little bit.
Yeah.
I decided, I got a scholarship, an academic scholarship to Mississippi Industrial College.
Is that Woods Valley now?
No, it was a private school run by some church group or the other.
Where is it located?
It was in Holly Springs, across the road from Rust.
Okay.
And I just took the test because I wanted to get away from school that day, so I took the test. But after high school, and I had applied, I wanted to go to Memphis State, and then I heard that all these people had walked off plantations in the Delta, farm workers.
And Memphis State's a white school, right?
It probably was, I don't remember, but probably.
Okay.
All of these people had walked off plantations in the Delta. They said 1,000 people. And I thought, oh, that's where I have to be. I had no clue about anything. I just turned 18 the month before I graduated. I went to a meeting at Mary Holmes Junior College, reconnected with some of the people I had met in '63, and decided that I'm going to work in the movement full time. Didn't occur to me that you have to have money or a place to live, none of that. I'm going. So I went home from my week's meeting in Mary Holmes Junior College and told my mother I'm not going to college yet. I'm going to work in the movement. And she couldn't believe it. She's like, what do you mean? I'm going to work in the movement. There, 1,000 people walked off plantations in the Delta, and I'm going to work with them. And so, what could she do? My older sister came to see me, and she slipped me $10, my bankroll.
Go work in the Delta with $10.
Yeah, that was what I had, $10.
You're not the only one.
And I went to the Freedom office. It wasn't the SNCC office, I don't think, and asked if anybody was driving down to Jackson. And Lou Grant, who was head of the project at that time.
Lou Grant?
Yeah, his name was Louis Grant. We called him Lou. He was driving down, so I said, can I get a ride? I'm going to Jackson. I had made no connections. Look, I had just turned 18, which meant you don't get out of jail at 5 o'clock anymore.
Right.
You're now 18.
It's a little more serious.
It's a little more serious. So we went to Jackson, to Mount Beulah, which was a conference center. They were getting ready for some major demonstration that I don't think I even knew about. And I got a room for free, of course, and got my little blankets and sheets and went to get in my bed, and some guy walked into the room, there were no locks, and got into the bed over there. And I thought, ooh, you better get out of here. Left my bag and saw somebody walking down the hallway, and I went into the first room I saw on my left. And there were 3 old women in there from Batesville, my hometown. I thought, oh my goodness. They said, girl, what are you doing here? Are you here for the demonstration? Uh-huh, yeah. I'm here for the demonstration. And they said, well, where are you staying? I said, I have a room up the hall. And they said, stay with us. I said, okay.
That sounds good to me.
Sounds good. So I stayed with them overnight, got a ride into Jackson the next day with my little bag, and I didn't have my $10 anymore. I saw a dress that I wanted. For $7, I bought it. Just completely a child. Went into Jackson to the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party office and had my little bag with me, and they were canvassing about the demonstration the next day, and I pretended I knew the area. I knew nothing about Jackson. It was a city. I came from the country. So I helped somebody pass out leaflets in town about the demonstration the next day. Went back into the office. Everybody was gone except one other woman who was from California. And we were both sitting in the office on our bags. And the last person to leave the office said, do you have someplace to stay? And we both went, no. And he said, well, come and stay with me. And so we picked up our bags and went with him. He was living with a family in Jackson, and we slept there and left our bags the next day, went to the demonstration, was arrested about an hour in, maybe within the hour we were arrested, and taken to the Jackson Fairgrounds. And that's where all the old women I had seen from Batesville were. Everybody, there were about 1,000 women in there, I was in there for 2 weeks, met new people. We didn't have clothes. So somebody had a trench coat, and we passed the trench coat around. You can go take a shower, you can wear the trench coat while you're taking your shower and washing your clothes, with Ivory soap. For years, I couldn't stand the smell of Ivory soap because of that. You washed your clothes, you hung them up to dry with somebody's trench coat on. When they were dry or almost dry, you put your clothes on and gave the trench coat to somebody else.
Amazing.
2 weeks. You never heard that story?
No.
2 weeks.
I mean, I knew about people being in the fairground.
Oh, it was
what
horrible.
Was it like?
Well, they gave us mattresses to sleep on the floor. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, you got up and stacked your mattress against the wall and went outside to eat your breakfast. And there were 50-gallon tanks with fire under them, and you had to wash your tray, dip it in the next one and the next one, and put it down, and hope it didn't get so hot you couldn't hold on to it, because you knew they would make you stick your hands in this boiling water. It was a little bit scary.
I bet.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember what we ate. It was something terrible. Maybe syrup and grits, or biscuits and grits. They took all of the white women out and put them in the jail. We stayed in the fairgrounds. And I remember there was one woman they weren't sure. And they said, asked her if she was colored or white, and she said she didn't know. And so they ended up taking her out and putting her in the jail with the white women.
Was she local?
No, she was not local. Every day your hands got kind of sore from sitting on concrete. You walked around and talked to people about what they were doing in their communities. Met a lot of folks my age. I think I met June in there, June Johnson, after a couple of years. Yeah, met her in the fairgrounds.
Did she talk about what happened with her?
Not then, I don't think so. I don't remember. Mainly talking about what you're going to do when you get out. And people that you knew and what your experiences were, and your towns where you grew up.
Must have been kind of educational.
It was very good in that sense. And one morning, one of the women decided she wasn't giving up her mattress. She stayed on the mattress. And there was a police officer that we called Red. I don't know what his name was. And he yelled for her to get up, and she refused. And he was going to hit her with his billy club. And she took the billy club. She was a big woman. I think poor Red got his leg broken. But it was a standoff between all of these women and the police. They had guns and their hands on their billy clubs, and we were just standing there, cursing. I let out some of my best words in there. And there was a little, I don't know what you call it, a little line between us. And a lady from Batesville, Mrs. Thelma Glover, walked in the middle of the little line and started praying and swinging her arms. And by the time she finished praying, they had all backed out. We're saved again. Yeah.
Were you worried?
I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen in my life. I couldn't wait to tell it. Her daughter was one of my best friends, about how your mom stood out in the middle of everybody. We're cursing at the cops and calling them names, and she steps out and starts praying and slinging her arm, and they back out of the room. It was funny. No, I wasn't worried. I guess I was a little crazy. I didn't think about worrying. Then 2 weeks later, they called my name. They were calling names, and somebody had bailed me out. And I went back to the house where I had stayed before we were arrested. Oh, and by the way, the woman had sent some underwear or something from the suitcase to us because she found ID in the woman from California's bag. I didn't have any. She sent us a change of clothes because her sister was a cop, which was interesting, yeah.
So there were black officers?
Well, there were a black woman officer, her sister. I don't know if there were others.
I didn't know that. Of course, by that time in Jackson, I guess.
It was 65.
Yeah. Well, they had all the protests in 63 over hire. One of the demands was hiring.
Yeah, I think there was I don't know how many black women were on the police force, but that one came. And we were sitting in the woman's house. She was a beautician. She saw us and closed her shop. She was a beautician. Took us to our house, and we could take a real bath in warm water and eat real food. And she was just very sweet. And the next day, we slept in a bed, not on the concrete floor with a little thin mattress. Next day, we're sitting there, and the California woman said, "That looks like a SNCC person." And it was my friend Hollis Watkins. And one of the lawyers had remembered my name because it was a little different. And he found us somehow.
So Hollis did?
Yeah.
That's interesting. How did you know Hollis?
From 1963.
From meeting him in Greenwood?
Yeah.
Yeah.
1963, yeah. And we stayed in touch loosely. And so I went with Hollis to Macomb, Mississippi. And Macomb was one of those hot places, scary. And I was a little nervous about Macomb. Other places I knew, Batesville was mild compared to there. And I met Curtis Hayes. Curtis is now Curtis Muhammad. Curtis was putting together a group of Mississippi kids to work in the Delta, just what I needed. So I went up after a couple of days in Macomb. I went with Curtis up to Cleveland, Mississippi. And Cleveland was one of the places where the Mississippi Freedom Labor Union was organized. Shaw was near Cleveland. And had no idea what you do to organize anything or anybody except my experiences in Batesville. And I stayed with Owen Brooks initially because the National Council of Churches was paying the stipend for Freedom Corps. And I was going to be a part of that group. And when you talked about the difference in men and women, Freedom Corps was mainly guys and me. Guys and me.
Do you know why?
But no, I have no idea.
Who did you say was paying it for the National Council?
Delta Ministry.
Oh, Delta Ministry.
From the National Council of Churches.
So they were recruiting young people in Mississippi to be the Freedom Corps?
Curtis did.
Curtis did.
Uh-huh.
Being paid for by Delta Ministry.
Yeah, and we got $10 a week. And of course, I was filling my 18. I'm now an adult person because I'm 18. And I'm staying with Owen Brooks, who is working for the Delta Ministry. And Owen was funny. I thought he was an old man. He was about 30, I guess. And I went out one night with a group of movement people to a juke joint, Rexburg, where they were playing live blues, loved blues, and stayed out all night. Got back the next day. I'm 18, remember?
Right.
I'm an adult person. I can stay out all night if I want to, I said to myself. Owen was like a mother hen. He said, "You stay out all night again, and I will call your mother." Where have you been? I told him the story. It didn't work. Owen found a family for me to stay with. He wasn't going to be responsible for young Juadine leaving Batesville for the first time, trying to hang out, have no clue about anything. So I stayed with the Washington family.
You thought you were on your own.
Nope, not anymore. No, not anymore. So I went to live with the Washington family for a minute or two. And then they sent me off to Rosedale, one of the places where the Freedom Labor Union was really big, and a lot of the farm workers had lived in the little town. And I was to organize and work with them. Lived with a family there, Frank Davis, who was the local leader. And it was interesting because he lived right across the road or the street from the courthouse and the jail. And I stayed in the room with their daughter, who was, I think, a 14-year-old. And they had 3 other people living in their house. Now, the house was tiny. Morton Thomas from Boston, I think, and a student at Harvard. Billy Kochiyama, who was Japanese, grew up in Harlem. And was there another person? Maybe that was it.
So these guys are people who came into Mississippi.
Yes.
What about the rest of the Freedom Corps? Were they people from outside or local?
They were local. Everybody was in the movement at home. Was Maurice Webb from my county. He's still there. Homer Crawford. Willie had been a farm worker. He was a tractor driver, I think. Isaac Foster, who had been a tractor driver on somebody's plantation. And Joe Harrison from Holmes County.
Did you think about the fact that the other Freedom Corps and these outside folks are mostly men?
No,
Didn't,
no.
did you notice?
Yeah, I noticed.
But you didn't think.
I had to fight them sometime,
How,
but I could curse as good as they could, so.
Tell me about that.
No, they would. This had nothing to do with the movement. There was a softball game. I played softball. And Ben Brown, I'm sorry, Benjamin Brown.
You said he's the one that got killed? in
Yes,
Washington State?
yes, he did. Ben said, "Why don't you act like other girls?" And I said, "Just because you can't play softball is not my problem. I'm playing first base." And I played first base.
You wasn't studying about them.
Not at all. And then I recruited another young woman, Helen Williams from Rosedale, to come and work with us. And then another woman I'd met in Washington at one of those demonstrations, Tut Tate, came and joined the group. Helen could hang. Tut, not so much.
Yeah.
And Faye, my homegirl, my best friend, came and worked with us for a minute. She also couldn't hang.
Yeah.
Because the boys were boys,
Yeah.
ignore them.
They didn't find that as easy as you.
No, and when we went out to the plantations to talk to farm workers, we left one person in the van. We had a van. And when you saw the dust coming, you knew the owner was coming. So you had to beep the horn, and everybody ran out from wherever they were and jumped in the car, and we took off, and the fight was on. Like they were chasing us, and we were chased. We just ran, that's all. And then we would go back, and sometimes when we went back, the people were gone. They had left overnight. It was like slavery. They lived there, they shopped there, they went to church there. There was one plantation, Delta Pines, had 7 churches, I counted them.
Really?
Yeah. And people had no reason to leave.
So this is to keep people closed off on
Yeah,
the plantation?
yeah. And so when you went back and knocked on a door that you had knocked on last week or the day before and nobody was there, you knew they had run away.
Run away so they wouldn't be associated with the movement?
No,
Run
to get
so
away.
they would get away from
A
the
different life.
plantation? Yeah. When you say you're working and organizing with the Farm Labor Party, what was,
Freedom Labor Union.
sorry,
Uh-huh.
Farm Labor Party, what is this?
It's Freedom Labor
Yeah,
Union.
no, I'm trying to think of where I got the Freedom Labor Union.
Uh-huh.
I think the Farmer Labor Party was
At
in
the
Minnesota.
time,
Freedom
okay.
Labor Union.
At the time, people were making 30 cents an hour, 10-hour days, $3 a day. And what we were saying is they needed to make more money in organizing, and that they should walk off if they couldn't get more money, because they couldn't live on $3 a day. They were on the plantations mainly because they had accumulated bills with the company store, to eat. And they couldn't leave because they had a debt. They had to pay. Couldn't pay the debt. So that was in Bolivar County, Sunflower County, and Washington counties. And I also tried to organize a little tiny freedom school, because a lot of the kids had dropped out at 3rd grade, to teach people how to write their names,
Yeah.
simple stuff. Billy Kochiyama's family had lived in Harlem. His parents had been in internment camps during World War II, and when they were released, they moved to Harlem. And his mom was a big follower of Malcolm X. Billy was the first person who told me I was African American. I think he called us Afro-American at the time. I was like, okay, we can be that. Billy also was not your typical nonviolent movement person. I went out of town for some meeting or the other, got back to town, and they said, got to go to court at 2 o'clock. Billy was arrested over the weekend. I was like, okay, I got my $10, right? Billy had been standing with one of the kids when the Klan marched through town. And one of the Klansmen, we're talking about the KKK now, called him Tojo. That was his behind. Billy kicked his behind right there and was arrested. I used my $10 to get Billy out of jail, or to keep him out of jail. I think that was the fine, $10. Good thing, because we didn't have more than that. And Billy went back to New York at the end of the summer. And I didn't ever see Billy again. Mm-hmm. It was over. I met his mom a few years later.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it was kind of a nice ragtag crew in Rosedale, yeah.
So were you able to get farmers to organize and walk off?
There were a lot of people who walked off, but they had walked off with no means of support, you know. Labor unions, Freedom Labor Union had no money. I think Isaac Foster, one of the guys who worked with Freedom Corps, was one of the organizers of the Freedom Labor Union, but didn't really know how unions worked. I wish I could remember details. I know there was a group of them living in tents near Greenville.
Near the air base?
Oh, that was later.
That was later?
That was later. The air base, the Delta Ministry sent me to raise money for people to Minnesota and to Pennsylvania. It was my first plane ride. I was scared to death, but I had to put on a brave front. And
so you're not worried about anything in Mississippi, but you're afraid of an airplane?
Yes, absolutely. And I got to speak at little church groups and stuff in Minnesota and in Pennsylvania and Illinois. And this was also, I guess, it was late 65 or early 66. I went with Reverend Robert Beach. We called him Bob Beach. That was kind of fun.
I was going to say, was it exciting once you got there?
It was different, you know, yeah. In Minnesota, there were a couple of women who had been in Greenville working for Delta Ministry, and so I stayed with them. So I knew them. The church groups, you know, I guess they had never seen somebody like me before, and that was kind of interesting.
How so?
They were just sort of staring.
Really?
At one church, they had me put on a robe, and, you know, with the preachers, and I stood there and did my little talk.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I thought so too. Okay, I'll put it on, I don't care. And most of the groups were white. When I went to Pennsylvania, and I'm just outside of Pittsburgh, I asked the minister that I was living with, I don't know whether we were black or colored then, other people like me nearby, because I hadn't seen any. And so he arranged with the NAACP for me to come and speak in the Hill District.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And one of the women said, "Where are you staying while you're here?" And I said, "Mount Lebanon." She said, "Oh my goodness, girl, it's a wonder we haven't seen you hung up on a tree out there." I'm like, "Are you serious?" She said, "Yep."
They teach you about the North.
Yeah, it was revelation. It was like, black people don't go out there after dark. And I don't know that we were black yet, but you know, you don't go out there after dark. Oh, that's why I leave before sun up and go back after dark. Okay.
So you
And
didn't
then-
feel worried, but they're like teaching you.
Yeah, it was like, okay, I didn't know that. And then I think the next stop was Illinois. And I spoke at the seminary in Chicago. I don't remember the name, McCormick, maybe? I don't know.
There is
But
McCormick
I think that's where I
Center or
was speaking.
something.
And they told me they had a family for me, and I said, "I have family here."
Of course.
Up the river. So they had to take me to the south side, and I had to yell up in the tenement for my older sister to come and get me. downstairs to let me in. And I was speaking at a church there on Sunday.
Had you been in Chicago before?
No, no. And my sister did not like the way I looked. You cannot go out of this house looking like that.
Uh-oh.
So she straightened my hair and put me on a suit with heels. But they will not recognize me. This is not me. And I allowed it because you had to respect your elders. That was how I grew up, you know? Okay.
I haven't noticed you speaking of respect in your elders a lot.
Well, I had trouble with that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I had trouble with it.
So you said your sister wanted to straighten your hair.
She did. She didn't want to. She did it.
So were you wearing your hair natural on purpose because
Yeah.
of the movement?
Yeah.
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 Did all the women in the movement? leave
No,
their hair
not. I
natural?
don't think so. But I had met a young woman named Gwen Gillian, I think, and she had her hair natural, and I thought that's not so bad. And then I saw an album cover with Odetta on it with natural hair. I hadn't cut my hair yet, but I did. I said, I don't need to straighten my hair. Why would I do that?
That's cool.
But my sister wasn't having it. So I went back to Mississippi, and something was happening. The politics of the movement, I think, was changing early 1966.
Can you describe that or talk about that?
I don't really remember. I wish. The Freedom Corps was kind of breaking up. I don't remember why. But,
Were there racial conflicts?
well, Freedom Corps was all black. It was Curtis and us.
But you were working with some of the white kids and
Yeah,
and
of course.
Tommy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't remember that.
yeah.
I don't know. I have to try and remember what happened because I've blocked on it. But I left my place in Bolivar County. I was living with a family there who had absolutely nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. I slept with some of the kids, and you could sit in the bed and see a mouse running across the pillow.
Oh, man.
Like, I can't handle this.
The floor is one thing, but the pillow?
Yeah, it's time to move. I went to Jackson, and I don't remember what went into that decision. Helen decided to go back home to Rosedale. I went to Jackson. The guys also split up. I don't remember what caused the split, and I'll send a note to Curtis and ask him if he remembers. In Jackson, I stayed with another group of movement women in the patio apartments where other SNCC people lived. Yeah.
Who were some of the people you were staying with then?
The women in that apartment was Gracie Hawthorne from Hattiesburg, Joyce Brown from Macomb, Marjorie Hyatt. Margie was from Hattiesburg, and she also claimed Pittsburgh somehow. And most of them worked for the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in the office. And I wasn't sure what I was doing yet, but Frank Smith always pulled me out when I did. So I went to work for Frank. He had Neighborhood Development Group or something, and they were supposedly going to make bricks to build homes for people in Strike City. That's what the tent city thing was called, Strike City. And I was working in his office and getting a feel for the city. It was...
Where was Strike City?
It was outside of Greenville, Mississippi.
And it's where people went when they went on strike with the...
When they got kicked off plantations. Yeah, it was a tent city, and they had a big sign saying Strike City. Isaac Foster, the person I mentioned earlier, was one of the people from Strike City.
Did you meet Jean Wheeler at that time?
She and Frank were married. I met her with Frank. I think they were already married. And she was like a big sister to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. We still live in the same neighborhood. What can I tell you? Yeah.
Did she Was she still organizing, working with the movement at that
Yes, but she was working, I think, mainly with Frank and his brick factory idea, trying to figure out how you make bricks to build houses. I'm trying to remember. Jean, I think, was also writing, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And I had to think about, now it's almost time to go to college. You've almost finished your year of movement work, and how are you going to do that? I don't know. And some guy came into the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party office and was looking for people, recruiting for Bishop College in Texas. It was a Baptist college. And most of us went. All of us who had finished, high school. Yeah, we'll go. What do we need to do? And we went to Bishop.
So Bishop was actively recruiting movement kids?
No.
I was gonna say,
Bishop
that
was
doesn't
not.
sound right.
No, Bishop was not. Tom Brown, who had been a SNCC person, was working in the admissions office. He was recruiting movement folks without telling them
I
that.
was gonna say.
No, not Bishop. No,
I didn't
absolutely
think
not.
so.
No, no. So Marjorie Hyatt, Linda Wilson, who was active in Hattiesburg, and who else? Maybe it was just three of us, went to Bishop. Mm-hmm.
Did you all organize at Bishop, or did you?
Oh,
turn
it was a nightmare. Bishop was an experience. When we got to Dallas, I think we took a bus there. The person from the school who came to pick us up had a big sign on the side of the car that said, "Repent and be saved."
Did you turn and leave then?
If I could have, I think I would have. I was, oh my. Okay. And so I went to, we got to the campus, and I had an afro by then, had cut my hair low, and all of the little women, girls, were staring like, look, she washed her hair. It's like, oh, now I know what black kids feel like when they go to white schools. Had a roommate who was very religious, I guess, young, and thought this was a mistake, but they didn't try to pair us with each other. They wanted us to, I guess, stretch out. Went to breakfast the next morning, same thing happened. Everybody stopped eating to stare, like she washed her hair. So that was interesting. I had to get a job. I was in the work-study program, and I got a job. They put me in the laundry room, way where nobody would see me.
And so it wouldn't mess with nobody's hair that's already been straightened. Did any of the house mothers or the dean of students, did they say anything to you about your hair?
The librarian said something to me about my hair. She said, "You look as bad as that African woman who came here with her hair like that." Jamela Stokes from Hattiesburg said to her, "I've never seen anybody born with blue hair before," and that was when black women who had white hair would dye it blue. And she sort of looked at me because I got fired from my first job. First thing I did, and it wasn't an act of protest or anything, the sheet, I put it in this roller thing that was supposed to dry it. It never came out, and the room got all smoky. It burned. So they sent me out of there and sent me to the library to work in periodicals so nobody would see me. I could be behind the books and behind the magazines and all of that. That was kind of interesting. The other interesting part, I think, was the first night, not the first night, the second night, a couple of kids came up the stairs and said, "Can you do my hair like that?"
Interesting.
Uh-huh. I said, "Yeah, all you got to do is wash it and I'll cut it for you." I cut hair. Did I know about cutting hair? No, but I could do it.
So you started a movement.
I think everybody was ready, pretty much. And Ebony magazine did a cover in 1966 that said, "Au naturel," and they had women on the cover with afros. Oh, was my mother pleased. See, Juadine's not the only one. Look.
That's cool.
Mhm.
So once Ebony did it, it was all right then? People.
It took a little bit more time.
Mhm.
And Howard University, maybe that was later, the Queen of Howard had an afro, but people were getting used to the idea
Yeah.
of, okay, you can have nappy hair. Hmm.
So did you stay at Bishop? You graduated?
I stayed at Bishop for 2 years. And I had a good time at Bishop, made friends. It was like being in elementary school again in some ways because it was a very strict campus. You couldn't wear slacks. It was a religious school. It was a Baptist college. I got caught. You were supposed to go to chapel every, I think, 3 days a week. And I would send my punch card by one of the girls on the dorm, and I would sit in my room and tinker on the guitar. And one day I got a knock on the door, and I thought it was somebody else who had cut chapel. And it was the Dean of Women. And she went back and announced there was a young lady in her room playing the ukulele. And everybody knew it was me, so okay. And on Sundays when you were supposed to go to church, I went to the federal prison. There was a prison nearby called Seagoville. And my English professor had given me something that a prisoner over there had written, and I thought he was a good writer. So we connected. They arranged for me to come and visit. So that's where I went on Sundays. And I wrote, when you had to sign out the dorm, I said I was going to a Quaker meeting. They didn't know.
So they would let you do a Quaker meeting instead of chapel?
Yeah, that was chapel for me.
That was
But I was gone.
acceptable.
And there was a woman, I think she was from Louisiana, whose fiance was in prison there because he refused to go to the war. She would pick me up on Sunday mornings and take me with her. And I would go visit Lafayette Locke, the prisoner. And I also was able to get books and stuff for them that they wanted. And he would tell me where to leave it, like in the pasture near the prison. I don't know how they got them, but I would, you know.
Interesting.
Uh-huh. That's how I spent my Sundays instead of going to church.
What did you do when you left Bishop?
After Bishop, oh gosh, I left Bishop in '68, and Dr. King was coming to Batesville to speak before his death. Well, of course it would be before his death, but my mom said, Dr. King is coming to town, you need to go see him. And I said, no, I was depressed. I'm not going to see him. And so she did what she normally did. She got my uncle and said, go get Juadine and take her to see Dr. King.
Is this her brother? Your
Yes,
uncle?
yes, yes. So I'm sitting in the house and I'm not going outside. And my uncle shows up and he said, put your clothes on, we're going to see Dr. King. Okay. You don't say no to your uncle. And that might have been a male thing too, you know. He's the man in the house. And he's an elder. You have to listen, kinda. So I went with him to see Dr. King. And Dr. King had young people with him, and I was surprised. It's like, I thought this were all old preachers. What is this, you know? And I don't know.
You heard him before?
Yeah, in 1966, the Meredith March, he had been one of the people who came at the end, and he spoke at the rally. I can't say that I listened, but he spoke. I heard his voice. And people turned out in Batesville. I mean, there were just massive numbers of people there to hear Dr. King, which I thought was annoying again. I was like, okay, it's 1968. But what it had done is exposed me that I was back in town. And my friend Tut Tate, who had come from Washington and worked with Freedom Corps a little bit, showed up at our house in like 2 weeks' time to say, I heard you were here. And we were organizing the Poor People's Campaign. That might have happened after King's assassination. King was assassinated shortly after that, maybe the next couple of weeks. And come and help us organize for the Poor People's Campaign. And I thought, that's silly, just going to Washington to march and beg. But okay. And I went with her to Memphis, stayed at the Lorraine Hotel where King had been assassinated, and met these younger people who were working with SCLC, and agreed that I would go and help them get folks on the buses to come to DC, but I wasn't coming. I went to Grenada and worked with this young guy named Leon Hall, who was organizing for SCLC. And once they got people all signed up to get on the buses to come to DC, I went to Mount Beulah, and I was supposed to go back to Batesville. I didn't really have any plans. Like, what are you going to do now? I don't know. And Leon said, okay, go with us to Selma, and then you can go home. I said, okay. And went to Selma. Some little kid in Selma said, can you stay with us? And I said, sure. And he went and asked his mom, and I spent the night at their house. Next day, they said, come with us to Montgomery, and then you can go home. I stayed with Leon's family in Montgomery. Come with us to Birmingham, and then you can go home. And I ended up in Washington.
And that's with the Poor People's Campaign?
With the Poor People's Campaign, yes.
So was that the mule train?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the mule train. Ended up in Washington, D.C.
What was it like to travel with the mule train?
One of the interesting things, the mule train I wasn't so much into, but one of the things that happened, I think, in Birmingham is I met these reporters from the New York Times and the Washington Post. I met Earl Caldwell, Gerald Fraser, he just died. Yeah. Tom Johnson were there for the New York Times, and Bob Maynard from the Washington Post. They were interesting. So I kind of hung out with them and listened to what they were doing and thought, interesting work. Okay. I think that was more interesting to me than trying to organize people to come to Washington to sit in Tent City.
You said that you didn't really see the point of going to Washington to march and beg.
Yeah.
What were you?
We have to figure a way to do it ourselves now. Washington is not listening. And I don't know when I came to that conclusion, but I had come to that conclusion. I had come here, I think, in 1965 to help unseat the Mississippi delegation. And we lobbied and sat out in front of the Capitol all night and went home and nothing happened, you know? Same thing had happened in '64, you know, with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party going to Atlantic City. And I didn't know for sure what we needed to do, but I thought we had to do something different than marching and begging. I think that's where I was. So in D.C., Washington, I made it to Washington, and they had put up tents on the National Mall. And SCLC staff, oh, this is terrible, Juadine, had rooms at the Pitts Motor Inn, a hotel.
So the poor people are staying in tents on the mall, and the staff is in a hotel?
Yes. I'm in the hotel too.
What were you? Did you think about that?
Of course I did.
And what did you think?
I thought, you know, what a difference. What kind of thing are you doing here? You have people living out here in mud, because it was a muddy place. And we were all sitting up in the Pitts Motor Inn, eating and sleeping, warm showers. It's something unfair about this situation. So I don't know how long I had been here, but one day we were driving down 14th Street. I was with one of the preachers.
And this would have been after 14th Street, after the riots?
Yeah, this was '68, after the riots. And I see Charlie Cobb walking down the street. And I said to the preacher, pull over. And he pulled over, and I jumped out of the car and hugged Charlie. And he told me that everybody is in Washington. I said, you're kidding. And he said, no. And I said, I'm out at what was it called? Resurrection City with the preachers. We need to do something. We need to organize these people or do something, you know. And he said, where are you staying? And I said, the Pitts Motor Inn. And he said, okay. And it was before cell phones, so there was no way to call. Went back to that place, Resurrection City, and did whatever we did. I think I was supposed to be working with volunteers or something, but I have vague recollection of what we did out there, other than look at people stomping around through mud and getting ready to go to demonstrations to march around the Department of Agriculture or something. Do not have a very good image of that.
Yeah.
That evening, I went back to the pits, and Curtis, I think, came. Curtis and his wife, Mimi, were here. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm out in the mud with the people at Resurrection City. He said, okay. And the next day, Frank showed up, Frank Smith, and said, get your stuff, let's go. You're getting out of here. And I got my little bags, and I left the Pitts Motor Inn in Resurrection City and the Poor People's Campaign. And I had an apartment with a roommate, and I became a student at the Institute for Policy Studies.
Oh, really?
Getting a little stipend, yes. And going
Who else
over
was
there
at the time?
at the Institute,
Yeah.
Frank Smith, Marvin Holloway, Ivanhoe Donaldson were fellows at the Institute. And I was a student. I was Frank's student. And I would go to seminars. And I mainly went to the seminars, I think, to eat. I don't know that that's true, but it's probably true. And then shortly after that, somebody quit work at Drum and Spear Bookstore. So I got a job at Drum and Spear Bookstore.
What was that like at the time?
Oh, it was wonderful.
I guess not everybody will know, so say what Drum and Spear.
Drum and Spear Bookstore was started, I guess, by Charlie and a group called Afro-American Resources. And it was every book in the world you could find about black people. And I had never seen that many books about black people. And I tried to read as many of them as I could. So when people walked in the store and I'm looking for a book about such and such, I can say, look over here. This book is wonderful. It has, so that was my first real job, I guess, outside of the movement, but it was not really outside of the movement. It was Drum and Spear Bookstore. It was wonderful. It was connected later with the Center for Black Education. They were offshoot of Federal City College. A lot of the guys from the movement was teaching over there, Black history kind of stuff, and I didn't go to the center a lot. I mainly stayed at the bookstore. And then there was a radio program on Sunday nights, Saya Watoto, the children's hour.
Can you spell it?
Oh, please. I wouldn't.
Okay. Is that Swahili?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we did, Mimi, Curtis's former wife, would do scripts from stories, regular stories, and we would read them on the air on Sunday nights, and take on the characters. That was fun. And you got authors coming to the bookstore to sign their books and to talk. And I remember one Saturday, I wasn't there, Lerone Bennett, who wrote Before the Mayflower, was in the store signing books when the police tear gassed the bookstore.
What?
Tear gassed it. Psst, shot tear gas into the store.
What was their
I don't-
supposed rationale?
I have no idea. I have no idea. It was very strange. It was Lerone Bennett, the historian. After that, I think we were always on the radar because it was old movement people in the bookstore. We moved to a bigger place because people were ordering books from all over the country, coming into the store, doing their book signings and stuff. So it expanded. Ralph Featherstone, who had been an organizer in Mississippi, came to be the manager of the store.
Featherstone was the manager?
Yeah, he was. He was first. Tony Giddens was the first one, then Featherstone. So it became a little bit more political, I think. People came into the store to talk and to get books and to tell us about books that they thought we should have. It was one of the biggest, I guess, black bookstores in the country at the time.
And did you feel like this was movement work?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, I did.
Was it part of the answer to that question you had been asking about what to do instead of protesting?
No, not really, but it was something to do at the time. We moved to a bigger place, meeting new people. Then, 2 days after we moved to this bigger location, Featherstone was blown up in a car with Shea Payne. And we probably should have had some kind of psychological counseling, but we didn't, you know. That was 1970, March 10th.
How did you cope with that?
Well, I didn't do very well with it, but Mimi, Curtis's former wife, had, guess, money. Did I get a job first? Yes, I left the bookstore. I went to work for the Black Child Development Group, downtown DC, where you had to actually put on clothes to go to work. You didn't wear your jeans and stuff. And met Florence Tate, who was like a big sister. I got a job as a receptionist. I had never had a job outside of the movement people before. And I couldn't type really well. I had taken typing in high school on a Royal typewriter. And here we got this new kind of typewriter, and I'm over there making noise, pretending I'm typing while people are there and answering the phones. And when they left to go home, I would do my work. I would type the letters I should have been typing during the day. And
so is that because you didn't want people
to know that I couldn't type? Yeah, that was part of the job. So I had to do my work, so I would stay. I'd get home at about 10 o'clock every night.
Wow.
And then the head of the organization had some kind of Black Caucus meeting, and she came in at lunchtime, and she needed me to type what she was saying. And I was typing away, and she looked over and saw nothing was on the paper. And she sat down to the typewriter and typed her own work and went back to our meeting. And when she came back, she said, "How have you been getting out all of this work?" I said, "When you go home in the evenings, I do my work." And she said, "I don't want you staying here late anymore." I was also rewriting people. "I don't want you staying here late. I'm going to get somebody to come in to do the work that you haven't finished and help you with your typing." I said, "Oh, okay." I wasn't fired. I think I became a program analyst or something. So I could do a little writing, rewriting, and typing at my own pace. And that was a 3-month project. When that was over, we went off to the West Indies. First to Puerto Rico first, with Judy and Mimi. Puerto Rico first, then to Haiti, and then to Trinidad.
That's Judy Richardson.
Yeah, Barbados. We were gone for a minute.
Was this just like, we're going to go and see these places, explore?
I think so, but I think it was also a mental health issue that we didn't ever talk about.
Yeah.
It was really good. It was a good trip. Haiti I loved.
Yeah.
And one of the things that somebody said is, when you get off the plane, say what you want to do while you're here, somebody will hear you. And I said, "I want to go to a voodoo ceremony." And about 3 days in, and then another guy, old man, came and said, "I take care of you girls." And he grabbed our stuff and took us off to the hotel where we were supposed to stay. He argued with the manager. We left there and went to another hotel because he didn't like what the guy was charging us or something. He actually did take care of us. About 3 days in, some man came and said, I came to take you to the voodoo. He said, you want to go to the voodoo? Yeah. So he took us.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was so scared I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know what to expect. And all of a sudden you're hearing these drums and these people are singing something you don't know what they're saying, and I'm scared, okay? We left there finally, and I prayed. This was the time. Oh, please don't go back with us. I don't know what they were saying. I promise you I won't come back.
You mentioned the drums, and earlier, I think before we started the interview, you said that there was drumming in Panola County.
Northern Mississippi.
Northern Mississippi.
Yeah, and Panola County, yes.
Can you tell us about that?
A little bit. I didn't know a lot at the time. 2 days every July 3rd and 4th, there were these old men who played drums. And the first thing you heard on the 3rd was a big boom, a boom sound. And it was like you knew the drums were there. You got new clothes to go to the event. A baseball team came to play baseball with the neighborhood guys, against the neighborhood guys. We got our new clothes and we went to the picnic. That's what it was called. And everybody came. These old men had a fire going to heat the drums, the skins on the drums, and they played, and only the men danced to it.
Only the men?
Yeah.
Huh.
The women were
You know
making,
why?
no, the women were cooking. The kids were dancing to the jukebox when the old men stopped playing. And it was like, will they hurry up and finish? I was embarrassed because my stepfather danced, and so did his brother. You know, it's like, oh, it's so embarrassing, you know. And they came every July 3rd and 4th, 2 days. And everybody came. I mean, the whole neighborhood turned out for the baseball game first and then the drumming in the evening. Had no idea it was African. No idea. No idea. And then some years ago, one of my girlfriends who had come to work with us in Freedom Corps for a second said, do you remember the drums? Those old men playing drums? And I said, yeah. They had fife, flute made from cane. Mm-hmm. I said, yeah, and I went online and looked for them and found them. The Smithsonian recorded them in the 1940s, traced the rhythms that they were playing back to West Africa, Mali. And I said, oh my goodness, we were doing that then and I had no clue.
That's interesting, isn't it?
And then I asked one of my cousins, did you ever go to the picnics? And he said, yeah, I went. Everybody went. So it was like a neighborhood gathering for 2 days.
Did they play at other places?
Yeah, all over northern Mississippi.
So you all got them for the 4th of July, though?
And the 3rd and 4th.
But they would play at other places
Yeah.
in the summer?
Lomax wrote that the women in other parts of the state saluted the drums. We didn't do that. We didn't know. Well, you know. And that they killed slaughtered goats and served goat sandwiches. We didn't do all of that. We had the normal, you know, picnic food. You can buy a fish sandwich and sodas.
Have you, do they still do it?
The drummers. The 12-year-old granddaughter of Sid Hemphill was supposed to hold the group together. I haven't seen them since, and I promised one of my cousins that I was going to look for the recordings because the younger people do not know about it. You know, everybody moved off away from the farms, and the older people didn't share, didn't tell us what was going on.
So, Otha Turner?
Otha Turner came after Sid Hemphill. They have a statue or a plaque or something to him in northern Panola County, in Sardis or someplace like that.
Because I believe his granddaughter and a group played at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival
I heard that.
years ago.
I heard that. I didn't know it, so I missed them. I would have gone. I would have danced.
The recording might be, you know.
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
We're looking for the 40s, though.
Yeah, but I think they have a recording. I I know they have a recording, I don't know if it's online, from the more recent one too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a record called Pinole and Tate County Fife and Drum.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
That's what
I'll
we're
see
talking
if
about.
I can find it.
Oh, please
I
do.
just got it all my LPs out of the basement, so.
Oh, please. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
I wanted to ask, I wanted to go back if it's okay,
Yeah.
and I'm still stuck on the fact of you're in church and you're supposed to play Amazing Grace, and you come out with
Oh, freedom.
Yeah.
It was
And you
wonderful.
lived?
I lived. I only know of one person who protested very strongly, and I've since seen her and sort of made peace with her. It was like, this girl has lost her mind. But it was also after I was almost 18 and I stopped playing at the church after I graduated high school because I left and didn't have to do it anymore.
So by the time you do this, the movement is really kind of big in Pinole
Yeah,
County, so
yeah.
a lot of people are into it.
They know it, but that's not what you do in church unless it's a mass meeting where you're singing freedom
But
songs.
you're mixing them.
I'm mixing it.
And what'd your mom say?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Mm-mm. She didn't tell me I better not do it again or any of that. She
Did
didn't.
people sing? Did people sing "Oh Freedom"?
My friends did, the choir.
Yeah.
We knew the songs.
Did you
We
plan
knew.
it?
Huh?
Did you plan it?
I don't think so. I think I just did it. Hmm. And the choir was mostly my friends that I had been with since I was 10, you know. So we knew what to do with each other, you know.
Was the minister one of the movement supporters?
No, I don't remember him ever mentioning anything about the movement.
And he didn't say nothing to you?
No, nobody did.
Yeah.
The deacon, after that meeting that we had at church with the record, they started locking the church. And the deacon went around to the different houses saying, your children are getting involved with this stuff and you better talk to them because I'm not getting them out of jail if they get arrested. He went from house to house. But by the time 1964 rolled around, he actually kept in his house a couple of the volunteers.
So people were moving in the direction of the movement.
Yes.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you weren't allowed to use the church for meetings after that, you know?
Well, I got up, we had something called, what was the thing called? All of the choirs got together to sing one Sunday a month from different churches. And I think I did get up and announce that they had locked our church and we could no longer meet there. And I did it. It wasn't completely innocent. And somebody from West Camp got up and said, our church is always open to you. If you need to meet, you can meet here.
Did you do that then?
Yeah, I think we went to West Camp once, but it was not in the neighborhood, and you had to get a ride. Although a group of us, 16-year-old Mrs. Glover, let us use her car. Her daughter, who was my age, could drive us any place. We would even drive off to Memphis to get a 5-cent hot dog.
How far were you all from Memphis?
59 miles.
So it's like the big city.
Oh, yeah, it was the city.
What was Greenwood like when you went in there in '63 for that week? Can you describe the community at all, or?
It was mostly movement people that I saw. We went to eat at somebody's house who invited us over for dinner. That was good. It seemed to be much more active than Batesville was at the time. You know, like I said, after Medgar Evers was killed, there was a mass meeting, and the church was packed, and people were out on the streets, you know, the people who couldn't get in. I had never seen that before. So it was a movement city, a town. Mm-hmm.
Are there people that you met that stand out? Were some of the Tougaloo students there, like Joyce Ladner? And,
No.
No.
Freddie Green was there.
Yeah.
Freddie was there. Freddie's family is from Greenwood, and she was a student at Dillard. I think she was a freshman. And my cousin was a freshman at Mississippi Valley State. So they got to know each other. And then I ran into Freddie, you know, over and over again after that.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know Mr. Miles was one of the really important leaders.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us what he was like?
He lived right down the road from us before my mom got remarried, Very strong man. He had a farm. I knew his sons, the two older sons, Vincent and Robert Jr. Miles. Everybody knew that he was a movement man. He was a member of West Camp Missionary Baptist Church. And he looked after us. Like when my mom was at work and we would tear down the 2 rooms, one night we were playing church and Mr. Miles knocked on the door because he heard all the noise to check on us. Mother was at work until 8 o'clock, you know? And we fell all in the floor and tried to crawl under the beds because it scared us. But he just wanted to know what we were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like that even before we knew that he was a big movement man.
So he was really a community person?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Our little road was pretty close-knit. Mm-hmm.
Who were some of the women in the community that were involved in the movement? What were they like?
They didn't take... Mrs. Glover, Thelma Glover, is the person who sticks out immediately. She was a local teacher. And she went to the meetings. She made speeches. And I told you she was the one who stood in the little thing between the cops and us praying. Her children, 2 of her children at least, were involved in the movement, Faye and Louita. Louita ended up going to the University of Illinois and becoming a lawyer in Chicago. Faye became a teacher in Chicago. Miss Glover was one of the outspoken women. Mrs. Pearl Robinson was one of the active women. I don't remember her making speeches. Mrs. Virgil Robinson, again, was one of the active women. Don't remember her speaking publicly anyplace.
So when you say they were active but they didn't speak publicly, what were some of the things that they would do?
Make sure people got to the polls to vote. Make sure they tried to register to vote. I think they took in civil rights workers. Claire, what's her name? Lawson was Mrs. Pearl's daughter. She was also one of the active women. Mm-hmm. The Thomas is the owner of the sundry where everybody hung out in '64. Had not been active before. But, you know, the sundry was a place where people hung out, movement people. And I don't remember them ever being really active.
But they were okay with people using it as a hangout?
In '64,
In
yeah.
64.
Yeah, not before 1964.
So some people are definitely responding to these outside
Yeah,
people?
they're really...
Is it because they're outside?
And they're white. You know, we knew white people from a distance. We didn't really know them up close and personal. And I think it was really something to see them walking in our neighborhood and talking to us and embracing us. And people were sort of shocked by it.
So
Mm-hmm.
it got people interested then?
I think so. And yeah.
Did you become friends with any of the white volunteers? Are there any that stand out to you?
Penny Patch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Penny. I wasn't really friends with her,
Uh-huh.
but you know, Claire O'Connor from Minnesota. We watched them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Watched them.
Yeah, we watched them. What are they going to do now? Let's watch them. Yeah.
Did you do canvassing with them or anything like that?
That was sort of off the table as far as my mom was concerned,
Oh, because she didn't want you hanging with the...
because they were going to leave and you would be here, and so I sort of worked with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
When
When we did sit-in stuff, then we did it all together. Mm-hmm.
did other people work with them?
Yeah.
You know, canvassing and stuff. So it was just your mom
One-
trying to keep you a little separate?
She was trying to keep me safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had trouble in the family before the 60s. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what kind of trouble? Is
Oh, it was serious trouble.
it? Yeah.
Gosh, one of my uncles had been in town, not Batesville, Pope, another little town, and he was jumped by a group of white men because he was going out with a black woman who went out with white men. And that was not, you couldn't do that. So they were going to teach the younger brother, and I don't know which of the brothers they were after. They were going to teach him a lesson, but he was armed and dangerous. So I don't know if more than one person was killed, but I know one person was paralyzed, one person was killed. One of my uncles, who had been in World War II, and my dad, went to the aid of their younger brother. And the one uncle took responsibility. Actually, it was just recently we found out that he didn't do it.
Really?
Uh-huh. He left his car in town so they would think it was him, took the weapon and the leftover bullets and got out of town. They took my grandmother and a younger cousin to the woods and said, we'll kill her if you don't turn yourself in. So he turned himself in, which was the plan in the first place. And they brought him back to Batesville. They first, in Oxford, he was in Oxford for a while, brought him back to Batesville and tried him and found him guilty of murder and electrocuted him, like in 1952, about 52, I guess. And then 11 months later, my dad died mysteriously. The secret word in the family is he was poisoned. He died exactly 11 months later.
Do you know?
The family moved away to, after the trouble, they sold the farm and moved to Kingsport, Tennessee.
That's your dad's family?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you know in the family story how they thought he was poisoned?
Yeah. Yeah, they think there was a doctor who took care of the black families, Dr. Martin. And he would make house calls. He took care of everybody. He would go to black gatherings. And my dad was given medicine for blood pressure or something. And that was, we think, what might have taken him out. Mm-hmm.
So were you aware of this at the time?
Oh no, I had no idea what death was. I was aware that there was trouble because I listened and eavesdropped on adults all the time. And when my dad died, my uncle told her, not her brother, but her dad's brother, came in to tell her he was gone. He also came to tell her when Uncle Lionel was electrocuted. And I heard it. And so she called me in because they were trying to figure out how to tell me. And I thought, okay, so I already know, but I won't let them know I know. And so I went inside and Mother said, your dad's dead. I said, okay, I guess I'll figure out how to cry at the funeral somehow. It was like acting to me.
Do you know why?
It was death that meant nothing to me. It was just not real. You go and you do performance at the church, and then you're going about your business. So,
Did you miss him?
not initially. I told you it was performance art.
Yeah.
When they brought the I remember it very well, and I don't know whether I was 4 or 5 years old. They brought the casket into the church covered in the flag.
Because he was military?
Yeah, he was in World War II. He went overseas. And my auntie started to cry. And I had to nudge her and say, it's not time yet. We're doing performance here. It's not time yet. And then I watched my older cousin to see when I was supposed to start crying because I wasn't sure,
Yeah.
And I would look back. I was sitting on the front row and she was sitting in a row behind me. And I'd look back. And then when the preacher finished preaching and everybody finished singing and they opened the casket, I looked back and she was squeezing her eyes together to make tears. And I thought, oh, it's time. And so I did my crying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, your extended family was more cautious around white folks?
No,
No?
I don't think so. Mm-hmm. They decided that was why I was in the movement, but they didn't say it to me directly. I heard
They
it.
thought, oh, you heard them talking about it?
Yeah. And then when I went in to get my photo with the number,
Mm-hmm.
there were a group of men sitting around in there, and they said, girl, where's your daddy? And they didn't know that they had found the wrong one. And I said, I think you know better than I do.
Did you really?
Yeah. But I know they didn't know which of the Henderson guys was my dad. So I was talking to Uncle Lionel. And I had gone up to see him when he was in jail there to take him ice cream. And didn't understand why he didn't want me there. He said to my sister, don't bring her back here. And I thought, why? I brought you ice cream. And,
Why didn't he want you up there?
it was the jail. He didn't want me associated or to be remembered that way. And then I went and moved to California, late 79. And that was the one person who survived, the younger uncle, was living in California. He never came back to Mississippi. And one of the reasons I wanted to go to California was to find out from him what actually happened that night.
Yeah, what did he tell you?
He said, only I know and I will never tell. And he cried. And my auntie said to me, look after your uncle. He feels responsible for his brother's deaths. Okay. So after he was gone, his wife told me that he had actually done the thing.
Why did they decide that the other brother would take responsibility?
I think that was the brother's decision. And my uncle at the time was a teenager. He was a young guy, and somebody, and I don't know who yet, I will find out, sent him away to the army. That's how he got away.
Okay. So somebody slipped him out of town and
Yeah.
got him in the...
But one of the family stories about my uncle is they gave him, he was a trustee in the jail, and they gave him $500 to take to the bank just about the time the train was coming through. And he took the money to the bank and went back to the jail. So he actually could have escaped if he had wanted to. He didn't want to. I don't know what that was about.
You don't?
And it's interesting because he has a son. And we have never talked about it. His son is maybe a year younger than I am.
And so you both lost your fathers.
Yeah. And how do you sneak in the fact that your great-great-grandfather was the slave owner? So, and he lived with his family, my folks, and founded a school for them. In Panola County until the 50s, there was a Henderson school where all those little offsprings went to school.
So was this so he lived with his family? Was this before the Civil War? He lived with his black family?
Yes.
And so then did he leave people land?
I think so. I think the farm that they sold when they moved it off to Tennessee was his land.
Okay.
I need to do more research on it.
I was going to say, yeah, did your family talk about that history at all?
No.
So this is your own research on it?
Yeah. Because I didn't know about him until one of my cousins. I'm trying to do the family tree and talking about the black people and the native people. And they said, what about Duncan? I said, who? Who is Dunk? He's your great-great-grandfather. I didn't know that. So I looked up the slave schedule, and there he is, Duncan C. Henderson. And he owned 13 people. I said, dang. There are no names, just ages.
And one of them is presumably your great-great-grandmother?
Yes. And it took some doing to find her name.
So you did find her name?
Yeah, not in the census or anything, but one of my cousins who was doing a family tree, I saw her online, so I sent her a note saying, are you my cousin that I met at my auntie's funeral? And she said, yes, I'm the great-great-granddaughter of Classy Ide Lena. I said, that's my grandmother's name? We found her name.
That's exciting.
It was very exciting. I had to tell it at the next family reunion.
Have you looked at the land records going back?
No, I have not.
That might be interesting.
That's
I
true.
think that you can look at my dad did some research looking at the transfers.
Yeah,
So you starting with, your dad's,
yeah.
anyway, I don't
Dad's
know if I would
grandfather.
track it back or not, but that would be
I
interesting.
think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Did you participate in Freedom School in summer of '64? Did they have Freedom Schools?
I think they did, but I don't know that I participated. I don't remember being in Freedom School classes. I don't remember our Freedom Schools being as organized as they were in other parts of the state. No. Hmm.
Trying to look at my notes here.
And so what did I do after all of that?
Yeah, what did you do after all of that?
After the West Indies, I came back, and Florence Tate again was trying to keep me working and doing stuff that I was supposed to do. And of course, I would stray off. I took a couple of classes at George Washington University because I decided I wanted to be a doctor. And I got myself a tutor for chemistry, and that didn't last very long. And then I quit another job. I got another job at Children's Defense Fund, of all places.
Really?
Yeah. And I think I worked there half day or something. I thought, no, this is not me.
What kind of work was it?
Secretarial,
Yeah.
answering phones. Then I worked for IFCO for a minute. They had an office in Washington.
What's IFCO?
Interreligious Foundation for Community Organization. They're the people who've been taking packages, were taking care packages to Cuba. Don't remember the order of that, but Florence again called me up at some point and said, Juadine, what are you doing? I said, nothing. Come to work with me tomorrow. I said, okay. And I went to work for the National Urban Coalition. And the job there was to be a public relations writer. And I thought, oh, okay. Go and interview so-and-so, okay. And they had a little magazine that I helped with. And then I read in the Washington Afro that Columbia University had a program for minority journalists. And I applied and got accepted. So I went off to New York in 1974, to the Michelle Clark Fellowship Program at Columbia, and became a reporter. It was funny because I was too shy, and I know you can't see that now.
No, I can't see that. I can't see that in the child you talking about, like, acting up.
It was a sneaky shy. I walked around with some woman running for governor of New York and didn't ask her a single question. Walked around with her for hours.
Really?
Yeah. And they were like, what are we going to do with her? She's not,
Where were you working?
I didn't have a job yet. I was at Columbia, and we were putting out a little weekly paper called Deadline.
That's good.
And so they sent for Earl Caldwell, the guy at Met on the Poor People's Campaign. Said, you better come over here. Juadine is not participating. I was kind of participating, but not really. And Earl had me calling people on the phone, taking notes. And then he would put the note, I would have to call him back if I didn't write down everything he thought I should write. And it was like, okay, drive me crazy. And then I was assigned to go to the prison to interview a man who had been imprisoned in North Carolina. I think he was sentenced to life or something, and they let the prisoners out to fight a fire, and he hit the tracks, ran away.
Go ahead.
Yeah, he did. He ran away, went to New York, was in a car accident. That's how they got him again. And I went to interview him and wrote a story about his life. It was interesting to me. It wasn't,
That caught your attention.
Yeah. They said, oh, you can write. Oh, yeah, I can.
Well, yeah.
And then that was the one story I really liked. Then I went to the Newport Jazz Festival and went to talk to one of the old musicians because I knew nothing about it. And he told me about the various people, and I wrote about Cafe Society.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh. And then I went off to my first newspaper job at the end of the summer in Mount Vernon, New York, working for the Daily Argus.
Wow.
Sheesh. Yeah. And I was a little scared.
Yeah.
The first story was of a kid who had, the elevator was broken, and she stuck her head through the glass to see where it was and was decapitated. Yeah, that was my first story.
Oh, wow.
First story was front page, huh?
Yeah.
And I did the newspaper stuff for 28 years.
So I guess you found what you liked.
I loved it.
Yeah.
What can I tell you?
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think your involvement in the movement shaped the person you are, or did it? How did it influence you?
I think it was the movement and the family, because my family was pretty strong.
Yeah.
My grandmother teaching in her little school. My grandfather, we never mentioned him too much, but I hung out with him. He was the person who people came to see when they were ill and didn't go to the normal doctor. He made medicine. And a farmer. He was a farmer and he made medicine.
Yeah.
He wanted me to be a lawyer. And at some point I said I was going to do that, but I didn't. I didn't really want to do that, you know? Yeah. I wish I had learned more about herbs from him.
Yeah.
I didn't, so now I study on my own. The movement, I'm still in touch with some of the people like Charlie and Frank. I don't see them every day, and that often, but I have to check in on them every now and then. Jean Wheeler Smith is young, is in my neighborhood, so occasionally we will connect again. Yeah, the movement was and is a part of my life still.
What do you think it's important for people to know about the movement?
That at a time when it was really dangerous in the United States, that young people stood up to power in this country, and like they're doing now, pretty much. And that you can do it. And yes, you lose a few on the way, but you can't let it stop you. Yeah.
Can you think of other things that I haven't asked you about?
No. What didn't you ask me about? Spiritual stuff and how I left church as soon as I turned
Did you?
18. Yes.
Did
Yes, I did.
you? Yeah.
I didn't play the piano anymore. I have a piano now, but I stopped playing at church. I stopped going to church. And I think one of my favorite things was, I come not to bring peace but a sword. It's time for us to fight, you know? That was before I went to prison, state prison, Mississippi, Parchman,
You went to
overnight.
Parchman?
Overnight.
How did you like
We-
it in Parchman?
Whew, it was awful. In Rosedale, the churches were afraid to open their doors for movement meetings. So we decided we were going to meet on the steps of the church. And we had a little rally on the steps of the church. And I don't remember what the issue was at the time, but when people left, as we were leaving, most people had gone already. Maybe 10 or 11 of us were left behind talking about what our next moves should be and how we can get the churches to open their doors. These people jumped out of the bushes with their high-powered rifles and marched us off to jail, which was right there, a block away, a half block. Processed us because they wanted to know who was in their town. And then after they got all our names and addresses and all of that, they took us off to Parchman. Parchman Prison.
Now, did that scare you?
That scared me, but we couldn't let scared show. I remember they took the men off the bus. I don't remember how many men were on there. And left just the women. And we got our courage up by cursing.
You cussed them?
Oh, yeah. And then they brought in a trusty woman. We had to strip. They strip searched us and gave us only back our top clothes and put us in cells. 4 women to a cell with 2 steel bunk beds, still. And I don't know, maybe we were there for 2 or 3 hours before they came around with a big jar of stuff for us to drink. I don't know what it was. But immediately after you drank it, you have to use the toilet. There's one toilet for 4 women. It was ridiculous. After that, maybe an hour or so later, they put us back on the bus and took us back to Bolivar County to Cleveland, not Rosedale. And then from Cleveland, we went back to Rosedale. And then I think the Delta Ministry had bailed us out or something, and I ran across the road to the house where I was staying, but sick. They gave us something to drink. I wish I knew what.
Did they do that with everybody?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, all of the people who were arrested in that group, yes.
In that group.
Yeah. Martin Thomas, who had been one of the white guys from Boston, didn't get out immediately. He was in Cleveland. And they beat him fiercely, the other prisoners. He came out looking really, really bad. I mean, even his ears were bashed. Mm-hmm. And I think his dad sent for him after that, and he had to go home.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did that intimidate you at all, that experience? Did it slow you down?
No. I decided I wasn't going back to jail, and you shouldn't tell this, but I had put a little pistol in my purse, although I couldn't shoot it, didn't know how to shoot it.
But you're still packing.
I was packing.
You
Yeah.
never had to use it.
No. And if I had, I probably would have thrown it at somebody.
Bring out that softball.
That's right.
You might have been better off carrying a softball.
That's true. That's true.
Are there other things?
No, I can't think of anything.
Yeah.
I used to give my little sister, my younger sister is 12 years younger than I am, and I would sneak little buttons onto her clothes. I said, put this on when we get to town.
So you have your sister be a walking billboard for the movement?
Yeah. Uh-huh. She was too young to have, no, she was too young to know anything.
Yeah.
If I was 16, she was 4. Had no clue.
Freedom now.
That's right. And have a little hand stuck up at once we started doing that.
What about the Meredith March? Can you tell us anything about that?
I didn't do a lot on the Meredith March. I did go. Oh, that's a terrible story. A doctor came from Detroit to help out the marchers, and he kept talking about the poor, downtrodden people of Mississippi. And we drove him up to the marchers, but I had to go home first to see my mother because the marchers were nearby. And he was saying the poor, downtrodden Negroes. And people burned rags at home to keep the mosquitoes away. We were driving down one of the little streets in Batesville, and I went, stop the car. And I went and jumped up and down on somebody's burning a rag, jumped back in the car and went, Molotov cocktail.
You're messing with that poor man.
Yes. And then we dropped him off at the marchers. They were in, I don't know where they were, Pope or someplace, and noticed that somebody was following us. So I stopped at my sister's restaurant, older sister, and said, somebody's following us. She gave me her .38 and put some bullets in it. And said, right facing the back window of the car. If they get too close to the car, shoot out the back window. We can replace that. I said, okay. And I put the gun in my purse and we went back to Jackson. Nothing happened. I guess they figured as much because the car stopped following us. Mm-hmm.
Were you in Greenwood when Stokely made his
Yes, I was
famous
actually.
speech?
Yes, I was there. But I had just gone up for the day. I didn't march. You know, we went up. I told you I was sick of the marches. And I heard the speech. I heard Ricks first, Willie Ricks. And I had been at the SNCC meeting when Stokely was elected, you know, in Nashville.
Near there, yeah.
Uh-huh. And I didn't think a lot of it at the time. I didn't know why it had become such a big deal later. Then I understood a little later on. It took me a minute. But we left the march. I left with Frank and Jean again, and we went into Greenville for something. And then we came back to Jackson, and I went to the rally in Jackson.
What did you think when Stokely made his speech at the time? What did you think about the idea of Black Power?
I thought it was necessary. I didn't think that was so far-fetched, you know. That was how we started, I think. We didn't call it Black Power, but that Black people needed to mobilize and do things for themselves. So I thought that was right on the money. I was surprised that it turned off so many people, you know. What do you mean? By then, the Deacons for Defense and Justice had unveiled themselves, and I think on that Meredith March, I wonder if anybody's going to be mad at me. I don't care. People were walking around armed, making sure that everything was okay. Not flaunting weapons, but being armed anyway.
Did that make you feel safer?
I didn't feel unsafe. I guess I'm just, you know, I didn't feel unsafe. Yeah.
Can you think of anything else?
No. While I was in school, Ben, the one who wanted me to act more like a girl, was killed, and I saw that on TV and kind of lost it briefly. Somebody sent me a ticket to come home, and I went down for the funeral and thought, what a waste, you know? How did that happen? And then I went back to college. Didn't get in touch with his family or anything.
And how was he killed?
The police officers saw him. He had gone to a restaurant to get a sandwich for his wife or something. And they recognized him from the old days and killed him. That was what we were told.
Yeah, there was a demonstration over at Jackson State, right?
Yeah.
About the police going through campus.
And Ben wasn't on campus. He wasn't a college student. He had been married probably less than a year. I think he was staying with his mom and trying to get a job or working some non-movement job. Yeah, that was kind of rough.
You said you lost it.
Yeah, I mean, I just emotionally.
Very upset.
Like, oh, how can you do that? We were on the plantations trying to organize farm workers and nothing happened, you know?
Yeah.
We knew how to run. If you don't know somebody is aiming at you, you don't know how to run, you know? He didn't have a chance. Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts?
No.
No?
Except it's kind of scary now, and we had better figure out how to mobilize ourselves again, you know?
What do you think of the current protests?
Actually, and this is terrible, but I try not to pay attention.
Really?
I try not to pay attention. It's too painful.
Yeah.
Like, why are we going through this again? You know?
Yeah.
At home, and I'm hopefully will go later this month to see my family. One of my nephews is a deputy sheriff in Batesville. And I thought, oh my goodness, okay. But he also is a preacher.
So do you feel like you had something to do with it being possible for him to be a deputy?
Probably. And one of the things I used to do, and he talked to me about it, is I used to take books home for them, my nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
That's what
When
they
you
got
worked
for
at the
Christmas.
bookstore?
Yeah, and that was their Christmas present. You gotta know where you came from. And he said he would try so hard to read those books. Yeah.
Would you have any advice for the young people that are leading today's movement?
I wish I did. I do not, because I don't know. It's so weird now, you know? If you listen to Mr. Trump and all of the stuff that comes out of his mouth, it's like, where did you come from? What is this? And it's scary to me, because at least then we had a close-knit community. Now we're scattered. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do you, I guess you cannot do it across racial lines. You have to be with people who like-minded people.
Well, thank you very much for doing the interview for the project.
Okay.
We really
I hope I didn't talk
appreciate
your ear off.
it.
And if you come up with questions later, you can always call me.
I will.
Okay.
I will.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture.